Today we're going to take a look at chapters 1 through 3 of Frankenstein. So this is when we actually begin to hear from Victor Frankenstein as our narrator. Um, the chapter opens up, um, and even before we start talking about his family, the background of his family, we see this kind of arrogance from Victor. Um, and that arrogance stems from him being self centered, his parents adoring him at birth. Um, and he already starts to kind of trigger his own test against God. Um, so we learn about his family. His family is one of the most distinguished families at this time, um, and they have kind of an odd dynamic. Um, his parents, Alphonse Frankenstein and Caroline Beaufort Frankenstein, when he's born, they are just amazed by him. Um, and they have their own children, but they also adopt um, other people into the family. So their birthright children are Victor, Ernest, and William. Um, the adopted are Elizabeth Lavenza and Justine Moritz. And we'll kind of get into those characters a little bit more. I found this family tree on the internet, and I thought it was a good depiction of where you can see everything, what's going on. Um, so we have the mom, Caroline, and Alphonse at the top here, and here are their three kids. But the purple represents the adopted children. And from Victor, we kind of say that he is, because he is his creation, therefore they're connected. We also have Henry Clerval. That is his friend, his best friend throughout school and growing up. Um, Now, they have kind of an interesting relationship. Now, if you watch the movie, just know that the dad is portrayed differently and the events that happen are a little bit different. So don't rely on the movie to kind of pull you through this book. Um, like I was saying before, Victor's very self centered. He uses first person possessive pronouns when he's talking. So it's kind of interesting. Um, and it kind of shows that we're only getting little glimpses of what he can actually become, which is this very cocky, arrogant guy. Also noted in these first few chapters, we see the role of women. Um, Now, if you look at like Elizabeth, um, I have a quote here. I have a pretty present for my Victor. Tomorrow he shall have it. And when on the morrow she presented Elizabeth to me as her promised gift, I, with childish seriousness, interpreted her words literally and looked upon Elizabeth as mine, mine to protect, love, and cherish. Now, remember that the family adopts Elizabeth, so it's kind of weird already that he's talking about her like this. Um, he says her hair was the brightest living gold, and despite poverty of her clothing, seemed to set a crown of distinction on her head. He describes her as saintly. The saintly soul Elizabeth shone like a shrine, dedicated lamp in our peaceful home. So he's already so infatuated with her, both her inner and outer beauty. It's kind of weird the way he talks about her. Now, I know at this time, um, being with your cousin or an extended relative wasn't weird, but it is a little weird that the family adopted her and he's kind of preying on her in a way. Um, Henry Clerval is his friend. Now, and I say he's this generic representation of romanticism. He's always happy. He's always looking for new things to do. He acts in plays. He enters into masquerades to act out King Arthur and the Round Table Knights. You know, he's very involved in the arts. Um, the way he's described is interesting, very generous, kind, tender. Henry is just a good guy overall, which kind of leads me to how he's a foil character to Victor. Victor's very temperamental. He's very violent, passionate, but passionate about things that aren't normal. He's so obsessed with science, and Henry's kind of like, dude, chill, okay? They're very um, the interesting portrayal between these two characters. Um, Going back to Elizabeth, she's kind of passive in a way. She kind of carries a secondary role. Um, so you could argue that Elizabeth is a foil to Victor in a way. Um, Now we read Mary Wollstonecraft's The Vindication on the Rights of Women. We talked about how that was such a feminist text. Um, so it's kind of interesting to see Wollstonecraft's daughter doing the same with Elizabeth and this character, and how she seems to be so weak and so passive. She's just presenting this honest image of the woman's role at this time and the status in the 19th century. Um, Maybe she's being realistic, maybe she's not, but what she's trying to say is men need to listen to a little bit more. Um, so this is interesting. Once we get to the actual storm that occurs as a child, this is where we kind of see his fascination with God and overcoming God. Victor will do anything to meddle with God's creation to cause destruction, and ultimately leads to his own destruction. But um, this is really interesting the way that he just kind of obsesses over God. Now, we also find out that Victor's mother dies. She has a scarlet fever, and I put an image here of what the scarlet fever would have looked like. There were no vaccines for the scarlet fever at this time. Um, Victor doesn't take this very well. Because his mom dies, he then becomes obsessed with death. So it's ultimately his mother's death that leads to this traumatic behavior, that leads to him wanting to create life from death. So keep that in mind as we move forward in these next few chapters.